This story comes from Kunu, and it happened almost 2 years ago. Kunu was talking to her sister, suggesting a trip for both families to a resort in an eastern province. Kunu had actually stayed there twice before and was really impressed with the atmosphere and service. After they decided, Kunu's sister mentioned that her family would go 2 nights ahead of them, and then Kunu's family would follow. So the sister's family would stay for 4 nights, and Kunu's family for 2. Kunu explained that this resort had private pools for each room, plus a common pool nearby. It was divided into 3 zones. Kunu had already stayed in 2 of them, leaving just 1 zone left to explore, the one where this story takes place. On the agreed day, the sister's family went first. Kunu's family left Bangkok around 8 p.m., arriving around 9 p.m. Kunu didn't know which room they'd get this time. After checking in, an employee led them to their room, and Kunu realized they had 3 adjoining rooms. The first was 314, Kunu was in the middle room, 3115, and she guessed the last one was 3116. Inside Kunu's room, there were 2 beds, one small 3.5-foot bed and one large 6-foot bed. The floor was laminate wood. Beyond that, a door opened to a private pool, with a common pool just a bit further. Kunu didn't know which room her sister was in, so she called her. Her sister, probably excited, didn't answer directly, but just said, "You're here? I'll open the door and come out." When they both opened their doors, it turned out her sister was in the 3rd room, right next to Kunu's. They chatted, drank, and ate until about past midnight before heading to bed. That night, Kunu and her child slept on the big bed, and her husband on the small one. They didn't do any prayers, which was unusual for Kunu's family. Normally, they tell the local spirits they were staying for the night. After a while, her child fell asleep, then her husband. Kunu wasn't sure what time it was, but the room was quite dark, with only dim light from the pool. Just as she was drifting off, a sound echoed from the bathroom. It sounded like something heavy had fallen, not something small, but a distinct thud. Kunu immediately sat up, and she saw her husband on the small bed sit up too. They just stared at each other, wondering what that sound was. Thinking about the items in the bathroom, they couldn't imagine what could have made such a loud noise. As most things, there were small toiletries. Kunu asked her husband, "What was that sound?" He just sat silently. They looked at each other, but neither decided to get up and check. They lay back down, and Kunu fell asleep. The next morning, Kunu woke up first and immediately went to the bathroom. She checked everything, opened cabinets, looked everywhere, but found absolutely nothing out of place. When her husband woke up, Kunu told him about the sound. He said he didn't know either, but added that he had heard the sound once before, earlier than Kunu, but he had dismissed it, thinking it was probably from the next room. So they both let it go. That day, both families did activities together, like sightseeing and snorkeling, until they were exhausted. They then split up to head back, as they had separate cars. The sister said she'd stop for dinner outside, so Kunu's family arrived back at the resort first. Kunu showered and changed, then left again for dinner. As she walked out, she noticed guests from another zone sitting by the pool, quietly drinking. They weren't swimming or making noise. She also saw that her sister's room light was on, making her think her sister had returned. Kunu's family then went to dinner and came back around 11 p.m. When they returned, most rooms were dark and quiet. Many guests had already gone to bed, but the same group was still quietly drinking by the pool. Kunu went into her room, finished her personal business, and went to bed around 1 a.m. Kunu said that night, after she went to bed, not long past, maybe around 2 a.m., when she was startled awake by a sound in the room. It sounded like someone walking on the wooden floor, making creaking sounds as the wood compressed. Creak, creak. Kunu immediately opened her eyes and looked around the room, but saw nothing unusual. She decided to close her eyes and try to sleep. But as soon as she closed her eyes, the sound returned, closer and clearer this time. Kunu decided to open her eyes again and stare at the source of the sound. The light filtering in from the pool allowed Kunu to see something that sent chills down her spine. She saw the silhouette of a very large man. He was stepping, walking towards the corner of the bed. But the moment Kunu opened her eyes, the man seemed to notice her. He stopped, stood still, and then stare at Canoe, who was lying on the bed. Canoe lay there, paralyzed with fear. In that moment, she didn't know what to do. But after a moment of staring at the shadow, she seemed to regain her senses. She tried to think what she was seeing. Was it a trick of light and shadow? Or was she just imagining things? She lay there, staring at the shadow for a very long time. She looked at her child asleep. She looked at her husband on the small bed, still asleep. But the terrifying part was that when Canoe looked away and then back at the same spot, the man was still standing there, unmoving. Canoe didn't know what to do. Her eyes were fixed on the shadow, and her mouth began to call out to her husband, who was not far away. "Honey, honey, honey." She called for a long time, but received no response from him. Canoe was so startled and terrified that she couldn't take it anymore. She decided to turn to her husband and immediately called out, "Honey, honey, honey." When Canoe turned back, the shadow was gone. At the same moment, her husband woke up. Canoe didn't tell him anything right away. She just tried to tell him, "Should we all sleep together on the big bed, the three of us?" But her husband was afraid it would be too crowded and the child might fall off the bed, so he stayed on the small bed. That night ended just like that. The next morning, after waking up, Canoe decided to tell her husband everything she had experienced. She asked him to try walking around different spots in the room, hoping to hear if the sound was similar to what she had heard last night. But it was very strange. No matter how much weight her husband put down or what he tried, every spot in the room remained completely silent. There was no creak sound like Canoe had heard. They both showered and got ready, then packed their bags and went to the restaurant for breakfast, preparing to check out. When both families met while having breakfast, Canoe decided to tell her sister and brother-in-law everything she had encountered. But after she finished, her sister suddenly said, "I thought I was the only one who saw it." And her sister began to tell her story. On the first night they checked in, her sister arrived at the resort in the evening. After unpacking, they went out for sightseeing and returned around 11 p.m. But after being in the room for a while they were all getting ready for bed around midnight, suddenly a knock on the door outside their room sounded. Her sister quickly got up and opened it, thinking it might be hotel staff providing service. But after she opened the door, the hallway was empty. No one was there. At that moment, she didn't think about ghosts or anything mysterious. She just thought someone was playing a prank. After that, she and her family went back to bed. But only a moment later, the knocking sound returned. This time, her sister didn't open the door immediately. She tried to tiptoe to the peephole and look through, but no one was outside the room. At that moment, her sister didn't think about ghosts or supernatural things at all. She just thought someone was playing a prank. After that, she and her family went to bed. But that night, her sister was startled awake because she heard sounds as if someone was walking around inside the room, walking back and forth. The sound was very clear. But her sister didn't open her eyes to look. She just lay there, praying incorrectly until she didn't know when she fell asleep. That was what happened on the first night. The next night, around 11 p.m., the knocking on the door outside the room sounded again. But this time, her sister made a mistake. She thought Canoe and her family had arrived. When she heard the knock, her sister quickly ran to open the door, but when she opened it, the hallway was empty, just like yesterday. And the events of this night were like a movie replay. That night, after going to bed, her sister was startled awake because she heard someone walking inside the room again, walking back and forth, making her feel very scared and uneasy. And even stranger, her husband and child were sleeping soundly, not feeling anything at all. On the third night, her sister didn't encounter anything unusual. Instead, it was Canoe who experienced the strange events. On the fourth night, after everyone returned from outside activities, they went to bed around 11 p.m. Her sister heard people playing in the pool outside. The sound of playing in the water was very loud. At that moment, she felt annoyed, thinking, why are they playing in front of other people's rooms? They have no consideration at all. Finally, her sister couldn't take it anymore, so she decided to walk to the curtain, intending to open it and if she saw anyone, ask them to play somewhere else. But after opening the curtain, her sister froze. Outside, the pool was empty, the water still and undisturbed. No one was playing in the water, and she couldn't find the source of those sounds. Her sister tried to ask Canoe if she heard people playing in the water at that time. Canoe confirmed that she didn't see anyone playing, only a small group of people sitting and drinking by the pool, but they weren't making any noise. After all these events, neither of them investigated the history of the resort to see if any strange incidents had occurred there. However, Canoe took the room numbers of both rooms, her room, ending in 15, and her sister's room, ending in 16, to try her luck with the lottery. It turned out Canoe actually won that round. The winning number was 16. Overjoyed, Canoe immediately called her sister, asking if she had bought their room number. Canoe had one, but the voice on the other end of the line was confused. Her sister asked, "What was the winning number?" Canoe excitedly replied, "It's your room number, 16." And the answer her sister gave made Canoe even more confused and shocked, because her sister said the room she stayed in was not 3116, but 3111. All the strange events remained a mystery. Canoe and her sister had no idea what caused them or where they came from. The scary, mysterious stories I've told you usually involve only one person experiencing them. But the story I'm going to tell you today is very strange because more than 10 people experienced it together. Although this story isn't very long, I want you to listen to it. Try to imagine the atmosphere as I tell it, and you'll realize that if this happened to you, you'd be just as confused and shocked. So if you're ready, let's hear this story. This story comes from Kun Ball, and it goes back almost 20 years when Kun Ball was still in university. He was studying design. The incident happened near the end of the term when Kun Ball was almost done with his thesis. Kun Ball's university was an open campus with buildings for each faculty spread out in different areas. The building where Kun Ball spent most of his time was the design building. The events occurred close to the end of the semester and also near graduation. At that time, Kun Ball and his group of friends had to work on their thesis day and night, practically living at the university 24/7. So Kun Ball and his friends asked their professor for permission to use the studio room inside the building for work, and if they worked too hard and couldn't go home, they wanted to be allowed to sleep there. The professor was kind and understood. He gave them permission to use the studio for over 2 months. Once they got permission, the friends practically lived there for almost 2 full months. However, Kun Ball preferred to stay at his own dorm, which was close to the university, rather than sleeping with his friends. The strange events happened one day. The night before, Kun Ball and his friend had worked in the studio until morning. After finishing, Kun Ball went back to his dorm. By the time he got to sleep and woke up, it was already evening. After he woke up and finished his personal errands, Kun Ball went back to the university to see how much progress his friend had made. At that time, it was around 5 p.m., still daylight. When he arrived, most of his friends were awake, chatting and eating. As evening approached, suddenly a group of friends shouted from the back, near the bathroom and the balcony area, where they could sit and do activities. The studio they were all in was on the 7th floor. When his friend shouted, Kun Ball quickly rushed to that spot. When he arrived, he found everyone quite alarmed. They were pointing outwards. Kun Ball walked over and looked where his friends were pointing, and he was absolutely shocked. The place his friends were pointing to was the rooftop of the science faculty building. But what shocked everyone was that there was a woman sitting with her legs dangling from the balcony of the rooftop. From their viewpoint, the science faculty building had about 9 floors. The distance from their building was probably around 200 to 300 meters. The situation was quite chaotic. Everyone was very surprised to see a woman about to jump from the building. Kun Ball said he could see the details of this woman very clearly. Her face, clothes, everything was distinct. He could even make out the bridge of her nose. Some people immediately took out their digital cameras and took pictures as evidence. Some time passed, but the woman remained sitting still. Many friends, seeing that something was wrong, quickly called the associate dean, a professor whom everyone respected and was close to. When they reached him, they tried to explain the situation. There's a woman on the rooftop of the science faculty building, and she looks like she's about to jump. Sir, please do something, or something tragic will happen. When the professor heard this, he was startled and quickly arranged for someone to go up and check immediately. About 15 minutes later, the phone rang. It was the same professor calling back, but he spoke in a very calm voice. He said, "You must have misunderstood because right now, my people have gone up to check, and they found that the access to the rooftop is blocked by a roll-down steel door, securely padlocked. There's no way anyone could have gone up there." The professor even added, "You must be imagining things. No one could possibly be sitting on the rooftop." But what the professor said contradicted the reality at that moment, because while his friend was on the phone, his eyes were still fixed on the woman. She was still sitting on the rooftop, still unmoving. His friend tried to insist to the professor, "I still see her. I'm definitely not imagining it. And most importantly, I'm not the only one seeing this. There are almost 10 of us here, and everyone sees the same thing." They argued back and forth. The professor insisted it was impossible because it was securely locked. His friend insisted, "Possible or not, I don't know, but there's really someone sitting on the rooftop. Please come and see urgently." After hanging up, everyone continued to stare at the woman. After a while, a rooftop door in one corner was opened. Everyone quickly looked towards the sound, and at that moment, everyone standing there was shocked by the sight. They saw the professor and a number of people, including security guards and some staff, opening the door. But what shocked everyone was their size. Because the two buildings were quite far apart, everyone looking at that building saw the professor and all the staff as tiny figures, like small black dots on a large white paper. Everyone at that moment was stunned. They tried to look for the woman, who had disappeared at some point. Kunbal, who was also there, was very surprised. He didn't know what was happening or what he and his friends were experiencing. When Kunbal thought back about all the events that had happened, he felt chills all over his body because he immediately realized that this woman was not human. As he mentioned, Kunbal and his friends could see every detail of that woman clearly, even the bridge of her nose. To be able to see that clearly meant the woman had to be taller than 6 meters. This became a topic of discussion among everyone. Did anyone or any friend see her disappear? It turned out that when they asked everyone, no one saw the exact moment the woman disappeared. No one had noticed. After the events of that night, all the friends sat down and talked, trying to figure out what had happened. Then one friend remembered that about a month prior, there had been a significant incident. A female professor had committed suicide by jumping from the rooftop of that very building. And when they thought back to all the events, her posture and attire, everyone agreed that it must have been that female professor. When you hear this, friends, you might remember that someone took pictures during that incident. But Kunbal said some friends' photos showed only a blurry shadow of a woman, while other photos were not very clear. Also, after this story was shared, one listener said they were there that day, and their friend had also taken pictures, but the photos looked similar, just dark, shadowy blobs, or only the outline of that woman. Encountering this incident completely changed Kunbal's view on supernatural matters, ghosts, and spirits. Before, he was a non-believer, someone who liked to challenge ghosts and places said to be haunted. But after seeing it with his own eyes, Kunbal completely believed that if you don't experience something like this yourself, you probably won't believe it. In one's life, friends, have you ever encountered a problem where you yourself wonder why strange things have to happen to you? I've been there, and I believe many of you listening right now have too. Today, I have a very interesting story to tell you. This story is about a woman who happened to encounter strange things, even though she was just minding her own business, but the events found their way to her. So, what kind of spooky story is this? If you're ready, let's listen to this story. This story comes from Kun Tarn, and it's a strange series of events that suddenly entered her life unexpectedly. Kun Tarn said she owns a hair salon located in the heart of Bangkok. This hair salon is like any other, offering a full range of hair services. The strange events happened one day. Kun Tarn said that day she had an unusually large number of clients. By the time she finished with all of them, it was past 10 p.m. As she was finishing up with the last client, a young woman got out of a taxi and walked into the salon, asking Kun Tarn if she could dye her hair. Since it was almost closing time, Kun Tarn declined, explaining that hair coloring takes a long time. She offered to just wash and style her hair instead, and the client agreed. Kun Tarn serviced her as usual, finishing everything around 11:30 p.m. After that, the client paid and left the salon. Around midnight, Kuntarn closed the salon, cleaned her tools, and folded towels. Then she went upstairs to the second floor to shower and get ready for bed. But suddenly, she felt something strange. Kuntarn said she heard what sounded like someone walking up the stairs. When she heard it, she stopped and listened intently, trying to pinpoint where the sound came from. But after the sound stopped, she didn't think much of it, assuming the sound might have come from the house next door. Just as she was about to lie down, she suddenly heard what sounded like someone knocking on her bedroom door. But the knocking wasn't continuous. It was a single knock, then silence for a moment, then another knock. At that moment, she hesitated, but in the end, she decided to get up and open it. As the door opened, a cold breeze swept into her room, making her feel strangely goosebumps. But at that moment, she focused more on the knocking, but eventually, she looked left and right and saw no one. So she decided to close the door and go back to bed. As she lay there, Kuntarn started to smell something strange. The smell was very foul, like someone hadn't showered, or like something dead, a putrid smell. Kuntarn tried to look around the room to find the source of the smell, but after searching for a long time, she found nothing. Unable to do anything, she decided to try and sleep. She only slept for a moment before she felt it again. It felt like someone was walking around her bed, and the foul smell from earlier intensified, filling the entire room. It was so strong that she couldn't sleep anymore. She decided to get up and check the air conditioner, trying to open it and look inside, but found that the smell wasn't coming from the air conditioner at all. And what made her shiver was that she realized the smell wasn't coming from any specific point in the room. It was floating right beside her all the time. She tried to look around her, but didn't see anything unusual. But the more she thought about it, the more chills she got. So she tried not to think about it, assuming she was just overthinking and imagining things. She decided to leave the bedroom to go get some water downstairs. Throughout her walk around the house, she wore slippers. And she felt something strange because throughout her walk, she kept hearing sounds like someone was walking behind her. When she stopped, the sound stopped too. The time was around 12:30 a.m. The atmosphere outside began to quiet down, and the atmosphere inside the house quieted with it. Just as she was reaching out to open the refrigerator door, a voice suddenly spoke next to her ear. It was a woman's voice. At that moment, Kuntarn tried to gather her senses, thinking she was just overthinking and hearing things. She quickly grabbed some water to drink, but as she lifted the bottle to her mouth, the bottle seemed to be knocked, causing a significant amount of water to spill onto the floor. She was very surprised by what happened, trying to figure out what she was encountering. She tried to scan the room, and at that moment, her eyes caught sight of a bag sitting next to the sofa. Kuntarn picked up the bag, but couldn't see what was inside because it was dark downstairs. She decided to turn on the light, and found that inside, there was one bowl and one clay pot. But what she saw made her skin crawl. Inside the bowl, there was a female doll sitting with bent knees, with dried dark red liquid sticking to the bowl everywhere. But what was even scarier was that she finally found the source of that foul smell. The source was the clay pot inside the bag. The clay pot looked exactly like those seen in movies and dramas. The mouth of the pot was covered with a tightly tied yant cloth with magical symbols. Next to it was a piece of paper that detailed everything. That this item was made to make people fall in love and be infatuated. But the terrifying part was that the paper also described what was inside. Within this clay pot were the soulless bodies of a young girl and a young boy, along with their birth and death dates and complete instructions for chanting and worship. When she saw that, Kuntarn was very shocked and didn't know what to do. It was the middle of the night, she was alone in the salon, and she had a mysterious bag in her hand, making the atmosphere even scarier and more chilling. And the longer she stared at the items, the more she felt as if she was under a spell. It was like a woman's voice was constantly whispering in her ear, "Open it, open it." She decided not to open it. She put the bag down and quickly went back to her bedroom. The next morning, she decided to check the CCTV footage to find out who the owner of this bag was, which client. She started watching from 7 a.m., but as soon as she started, strange feelings arose again. As long as she held the phone in her hand, she felt that a mysterious shadow was sitting beside her, and that shadow was leaning in, as if curious to know what Kuntarn was watching. Feeling that, she decided to open the live CCTV feed at that moment, and the image confirmed what she was experiencing. She saw herself sitting, but she wasn't alone. A mysterious shadow was indeed sitting beside her. What was even more shocking was that she could feel a breath on her neck at that moment. Startled, she sat still, unable to do anything. She immediately knew that everything happening was not her imagination. Kuntarn quickly replayed the CCTV footage until she finally learned that the owner of this bag was the last client from yesterday. The young woman had gotten out of the taxi with this bag. But seeing that, Kuntarn had a question in her mind. Why did the young woman leave without taking the bag? She sat there for a while, trying to re-watch the CCTV footage many times, but every time she opened it, that shadow was still sitting beside her, unmoving. Kuntarn started to calm down. She couldn't just throw away this bag because it had an owner. So she tried to solve the problems one by one. The first thing to deal with was the foul smell. Kuntarn decided to find another bag and put it over this one to prevent the smell from coming out. But after doing that, it turned out things didn't really improve much, because no matter where she walked, the foul smell followed her everywhere. That whole day, Kuntarn tried to ignore it. She tried to live normally, turned on the TV, listened to music. It helped to some extent, but the most bothersome thing was the smell. The smell floated around, following her everywhere. She stayed like that day and night until around 3 a.m. Kuntarn became so tired that her body couldn't take it anymore, and she eventually fell asleep without knowing when. Kuntarn was startled awake again around 6 p.m. because a strange number called her phone. When she answered, a woman's voice said, "Sister, I forgot something." That voice immediately made Kuntarn wide awake. She knew right away that the caller was the owner of this bag. When she heard that, Kuntarn quickly said, "I was just looking for the owner." "Where are you, client?" "I'll have a messenger drive it to you." But the young woman replied that she wasn't available to pick up the item yet because she had errands to run. She asked if it would be okay to leave the item for another day. Kuntarn quickly retorted, "I can't leave it because I have errands to run too." She tried to be as polite as possible to the young woman so she could send the item back quickly and end this matter. But the young woman didn't say anything, she just hung up. With that, Kuntarn became uneasy. She quickly tried to call back about 6 to 7 times. Finally, the young woman answered the phone and gave the destination for the delivery. The destination was quite far, in the Don Mueang area. Once she had the address, Kuntarn immediately ordered a ride. When the rider arrived, he asked what the item was that he was supposed to deliver. Kuntarn quickly said, "It's food, sir. Please don't open it." But after he took the bag, the rider suddenly opened it to look at the contents. And when he opened the bag, the smell hit his face immediately. But it wasn't just that. Suddenly, this rider reached his hand into the bag and pulled out the female doll that was in the bowl. He seemed to not be afraid of these things at all. After that, he put down, wiped his hands, and immediately rode off. After a while, Kuntarn's phone rang again. It was the same rider calling to complain loudly, "Is this address for a real person, ma'am? Where did you send me? There are only trees and a big shrine here." Kuntarn heard that and tried to tell the rider to call the recipient, but he replied that he had called almost 10 times but no one answered. Hearing that, Kuntarn quickly tried to help the rider call almost 20 times, but still couldn't reach the young woman. Finally, the young woman suddenly answered the rider's phone and told him to deliver it to a karaoke bar nearby. The events of that day seemed to have ended well, but the strange events then started happening to the rider instead. The rider called Kuntarn for 3 full days, saying that after he delivered that bag, he kept smelling a foul odor on his hands and body all the time. No matter where he went to deliver items, he felt like a woman was riding on the back of his motorcycle constantly. Every day after he returned home, he would argue with his wife, who later found out that the reason for their arguments was that his wife would see him constantly riding with a woman on the back of his motorcycle. But what was even worse was that every night after he went to bed, he would encounter a woman who would walk up to him and try to persuade him to go with her. When these events became more intense, the rider decided to drive to Kuntarn's salon to consult her about what he should do. Kuntarn advised him to go to a temple and consult a monk, hoping there might be a solution. After that day, the writer disappeared. Kuntarn started to feel relieved, thinking that everything must have ended. About 9 days later, the writer called back with his wife, saying that he had disappeared because he had been in an accident. He explained that one night, while he was driving to deliver an order as usual, his eyes suddenly saw the same woman, the one who came to him every night. That woman was standing in the middle of the road, pointing at him. Startled, he quickly swerved his motorcycle to the side of the road and had an accident. He decided to consult a monk whom his family respected about all the events that had happened. The monk advised him to become a monk for 7 days. The day he called was the day before he was going to be ordained. Hearing this, friends, you must be wondering how the story of that female client ended. Kuntarn added that after that, she had the opportunity to encounter this client twice more. Both times occurred when Kuntarn was closing her salon. As Kuntarn was pulling down the roll-up door, this client would appear behind her, trying to talk and ask Kuntarn if she could do her hair, as she really wanted to. But Kuntarn remembered all the events that had happened well, so she would refuse every time. But do you know what's the scariest part? In both instances, Kuntarn encountered her. The client was holding a paper bag in her hand all the time. Yes, friends, you guessed it right. It was the same paper bag. This woman would always carry it when she came to Kuntarn's salon. All these events remain a mystery to this day. Kuntarn and the young woman have no idea why this client always appears when the salon is about to close, why she always carries the same bag, and most interestingly, why she has to travel all the way from Don Mueang to Ratcheda, which is a very long distance. Did she really intend to get her hair done? If not, what was her true purpose? But one thing that directly affected Kuntarn is that to this day, no matter where she walks, or even when a client walks into her salon, if Kuntarn sees someone carrying a paper bag, she feels goosebumps, paranoia, and fear towards paper bags. It's an experience she'll remember for life. This story is about neighbors. Many of you listening right now probably live in townhouses or houses built close together, right? And because the houses are so close, you might encounter strange stories. So, what kind of story is this? Before we listen, please give this clip a like. If you're ready, let's hear this story. This story comes from Kun Boss, and it's a story his father passed down to him, a direct experience that happened to his father when he was young. His father recalled that this story happened about 50 years ago, when he was just 5 to 6 years old. During his childhood, his father had 5 siblings. He was the middle child. All of them lived together at their grandparents' house in the Buccalo area. They all grew up in a Chinese-style household. The house they lived in was a townhouse, part of a row of houses built closely together. As a child, his father would play freely in the neighborhood. His grandparents' house was right next to another house, which belonged to Emma. Emma was not a relative, she was just a longtime neighbor. But throughout his father's time living there, he noticed that Emma lived alone in that house. No relatives or children came to take care of her, not even during important holidays or festivals. She was very old. His father, being a child, loved to play around, and there were many times when he would go play with Emma. Emma was fond of him, always giving him snacks and drinks. They continued like that, and his father felt that Emma was like family. But one day, his father and many neighbors in the alley began to notice that Emma seemed withdrawn, not as cheerful as before. At that time, many people were saying that she might be missing her children and grandchildren because it had been a long time since anyone had visited her. Everyone in the alley felt very sorry for Emma. Then one day, his father clearly remembered he was playing in the alley as usual. At one point, he ran past Emma's house. As he ran past, he was startled because he saw Emma standing at her door, which was a Chinese-style folding door. What surprised his father was that Emma was standing at the door, sticking out her tongue and rolling her eyes at him. When he first saw that, his father was shocked, but after he collected himself, he immediately realized that Emma was just playing a prank on him. So his father didn't give up. He also made a face, sticking out his tongue and rolling his eyes back at her. After that, his father ran off, laughing and having fun. His father ran around in the alley for a while. Then he started to notice why there were so many people in the alley. It wasn't usually this crowded. But he only played for a little while longer before his grandparents called all the children back inside the house. At that time, his father didn't think anything of it. He went inside and continued playing with his siblings. That day ended just like that. About 1 to 2 days later, during the night, his father and all his siblings went to bed as usual. They all slept together in his grandparents' room. But after sleeping for a while, his father suddenly saw a butterfly, a moth, flying around a room. His father watched it for a while, seeing it fly around without stopping. He started to get annoyed. So he decided to pick up a newspaper, roll it up, and try to hit it. But no matter how many times he tried, he couldn't hit it, even though it was right in front of him. Every time he tried to hit it, the butterfly seemed to fly past. After his father tried to hit the butterfly for a while, but couldn't hit it no matter what, he started to get frustrated. Finally, his father gave up, lay down, pulled the blanket over his head, and fell asleep. The next morning, after waking up, his father still tried to look for that moth, but no matter how hard he looked, he couldn't see it. He didn't know where it had gone to hide. After showering, getting dressed, and eating, his father went out to play in the alley as usual. But it was very strange, because his father had noticed for about 2 to 3 days that Emma was nowhere to be seen. He didn't know where she went. Normally, Emma would come out every morning to water her plants, or go to the market, or do other things. But during this time, his father hadn't seen Emma at all. And after that, every night when he went to bed, his father would see this moth all the time. It would often fly into the room, circling around. But it was strange. All the time it flew around the room, his grandparents and other siblings didn't seem to pay any attention or be annoyed by it at all. Only his father would feel annoyed every time he saw it. One time, when his father was getting up and picking up a newspaper, his grandmother opened her eyes and asked what he was doing. His father replied that he saw a moth flying around and it was annoying him, so he picked up a newspaper to hit it. When she heard that, his grandmother just said, "I don't see any moth. Go to sleep. You're just playing around." After that, his grandmother told his father to go to bed. His father, annoyed by the butterfly and not knowing what to do, just decided to cover himself with a blanket and fell asleep without knowing when. Almost a week passed. His father was very frustrated. He was annoyed by this butterfly that he saw flying around every day. That night, his father lay on his back, staring at the ceiling where the butterfly was circling. He didn't know what to do about it. But while he was staring, at one point, the butterfly seemed to fly down, flying directly towards his father who was lying on his back. And at that moment, his father was shocked because what he saw was the face of the butterfly was Emma's face. But what was even scarier was that Emma's face was trying to stick out her tongue and roll her eyes at his father. Startled, he quickly sprang up from the bed, screaming and shouting, waking up his grandparents and all his siblings in the room. His father, shocked, jumped and hugged his grandmother, repeating the same phrase over and over. "I was haunted. Emma haunted me. Emma haunted me." Everyone comforted him for a while. His father cried from shock and fright until he finally fell asleep from exhaustion. The next morning, after waking up, his father told his grandparents everything he had experienced. After listening to the whole story, both of them just sat silently for a while. Then, his grandfather decided to tell his father that he didn't want to tell a child about what happened because it was something he shouldn't know. But since he had encountered it like this, his grandfather would tell him. He said that Emma had passed away. She was probably sad because her children and grandchildren had abandoned her, and no one visited her for many years. The cause of death was that she hanged herself with a wire rope at the front door of her house. She intended it that way, as if she wanted people walking by to see her body. When his father heard the story his grandfather told, he felt chills all over his body, because when he thought back to several days ago, when he saw Emma standing at the front door, sticking out her tongue and rolling her eyes at him, being a child, he didn't understand that what he actually saw was Emma's soulless body. And that day, when his father saw people walking back and forth in the alley, it was probably police officers and rescue workers who came to do their work and remove Emma's body. When he thought back to all the events that happened, his father could infer that the butterfly flying around in the room was probably Emma's spirit, who still felt connected and might have returned to play and tease his father again. And that's the whole story I brought to you today. What do you think, friends? As for me, after listening to this story, I feel both excited and sad at the same time. Leaving an elderly person feeling lonely and dying alone, I think, is a very sad thing. I want all of you to take good care of the people around you. Take good care of your loved ones so that at least when the time comes for us to part ways, we won't have to feel regret later. This story comes from Kun Jan, and it happened about 20 years ago. Kun Jan recalls that the whole story took place when she was in her third year of university. She remembered that at that time, the university had an activity that was voluntary for students, joining clubs. There were many different clubs, and students could choose the one they wanted based on their interests. At that time, Kun Jan and a friend joined a club and had the opportunity to meet a new friend, a male student in the same year, but from a different faculty. Let's call this friend Om. Om was a good-looking young man, an athlete at the university, making him the target of many girls' affections. At that time, Om got to know Kun Jan and her friend, and seemed to be especially friendly with Kun January. But at that time, it seemed like they were just casually chatting and playing, not serious about anything. Kun Jan had a close group of friends in university, and they often visited each other, ate out, and traveled together. As they entered their third year, the friends discussed that it was quite difficult to go back and forth between their separate dorms. They thought they should find a house to rent together, or a dorm where they could rent rooms on the same floor. That would be more convenient. Kun Jan and her group of 6 friends went searching for a place where they could all live together, until they found a dormitory. This dorm was like a single-story rental building, built like 2 rows of rooms facing each other, with an open space in the middle for parking motorcycles and drying clothes. When they arrived, Kun Jan and her friends went to ask the owner if there were 3 vacant rooms available, as they were interested in renting. The owner said there happened to be 3 vacant rooms, but 2 were on one side and 1 was on the opposite side. The rooms wouldn't be next to each other. After everyone generally surveyed the place, the rooms were deemed livable. So they all decided to rent there. Kun Jan and 1 friend would stay in a room on the side with only 1 vacant room, while the other 4 friends would stay in the 2 rooms on the opposite side. On the first day, after everyone moved in and unpacked, Kun Jan opened her door and sat outside her room. While she was sitting there, a young woman rode her motorcycle in. After parking, she walked towards Kun Jan's room and opened the door to the room next door. They both looked at each other and smiled in greeting. From her appearance and clothing, Kun Jan immediately knew that this young woman in the room next door was a new first-year student. The young woman then went into her room. That day ended just like that. The next day, Kun Jan and her friends went to class as usual. Since they had morning classes, they finished quite early, around 3 p.m. Kun Jan returned to her room. Because it was a hot day, she decided to leave her front door open and just relax in her room. While she was relaxing, she suddenly heard a motorcycle. She peeked out and saw it was Om. Om parked his motorcycle and walked to open the room next door, which was the young woman's room. As Om was unlocking the door, Kun Jan peeked out, which startled Om. He asked Kun Jan, "You live here?" She replied, "Yes, I just moved here." They didn't talk much. After Om unlocked the door, he went into the room. This made Kun Jan realize that Om had a girlfriend, a first-year student, and she was staying in the room next door to Kun January. After that, Kun Jan told her friends about it, and her friends even teased her, saying she almost ended up with Om. Good thing she found out first. Kun Jan and her friends lived in this dorm for a while, but not long after moving in, she learned a very sad truth. The room next door, Om's and his girlfriend's room, they argued very often. It might be because Om was a flirt, causing jealousy and frequent arguments. Kun Jan constantly heard them arguing. She was someone who really disliked such noise. In the beginning, when it was just verbal arguments, it wasn't so bad, but later on, it escalated to physical violence, to the point where Kun Jan started to find it unbearable. She had the opportunity to talk to other tenants, asking why no one tried to intervene. But the answer she got was that people had tried to intervene before, but in the end, the couple always got back together. So after that, no one wanted to get involved much. However, if the noise became too loud, the dorm owner would come and intervene. As I said, Kun Jan really disliked this kind of situation. If the two of them argued during the day, Kun Jan would walk out of her room, cross over to her friend's room, and mostly stay there. After experiencing this frequently, Kunjan also thought that she might have made a mistake moving here. But in the end, she couldn't do anything anyway, because the rent and deposit had already been paid. If she moved to a new place, she would lose that money. So she and her friends had to stay there. Then, summer break arrived. Kunjan and her group of friends didn't take any summer courses, so everyone went back home. About a month later, Kunjan needed to return to the dorm to pay rent and pick up some things. When she returned, she found the dorm very quiet. Most students had gone home. On her first night back at the dorm, Kunjan slept alone. While she was sleeping, she heard sounds from the room next door, doors opening and closing, bathroom sounds, showering sounds as usual. But when it got to the middle of the night, she heard the young woman crying, sobbing sadly. When Kunjan heard that, she didn't think anything of it. As mentioned, she heard it often, so it was normal. And then, on the second night, this was another night where she heard everything just like yesterday, no different. But it was very strange. There was only the sound of the young woman alone. There was no sound of Om at all. Kunjan only stayed at this dorm for 2 nights. After that, she went home and returned again about 2 weeks before the new semester started. She intended to come back early to prepare for the new semester. When she returned, Kunjan still heard sounds from the room next door, doors opening and closing, showering, and doing daily routines as usual. After staying at the dorm for about 3 to 4 nights, one day in the evening, her group of friends gathered for a party at a friend's dorm. Kunjan joined them. Around 11 p.m., she returned to her dorm. When she arrived, she saw that the light outside the room next door was left on. At that moment, she didn't notice if the light inside the room was on, but she could still hear someone living inside. After she entered her own room, Kunjan went to bed as usual. But that night, she had a dream. She dreamt that she was driving into the dorm, parked, and was about to go into her room. But at that moment, she happened to notice that the door to the room next door was left ajar. Curious, she walked over to look. When she opened the door, she found the young woman sitting with her knees bent, crying and sobbing, her face buried in her knees. Kunjan tried to ask the young woman if she was okay, if she had been hurt, if she needed any help. The young woman, who was crying with her face down, looked up and said, "Help me, please help me." This made Kunjan see clearly that the young woman's face was covered in bruises, her eyes swollen. She immediately knew she had been physically assaulted. Then the young woman started to speak louder, "Help me, help me." After that, her bruised face slowly swelled up, swelling more and more until it began to break open and become disfigured. Then the young woman screamed loudly. Startled, Kunjan immediately woke up and found herself drenched in sweat. She was still shocked by the dream, as it felt so real and chilling. At that moment, she tried not to think much of it, believing she had just had a nightmare. Because her dorm was quite quiet, Kunjan spent most of her time at her friend's dorm. Then, one day, she returned to her dorm around 10 p.m. That day was very quiet. There were only about 3 to 4 motorcycles parked. After parking, Kunjan walked straight to her room. But as she walked past the young woman's room, Kunjan heard crying from inside. She didn't know what she was thinking that day. Perhaps out of concern, Kunjan decided to knock on the door and asked, "Are you in there? Are you okay?" Just a moment. Then a voice replied, "The door isn't locked." So she decided to open the door and went inside and found the young woman sitting with her knees bent, her face buried, crying and sobbing. When Kunjan went in, she quickly asked if she was okay, if anything hurt, if she should take her to a doctor. The young woman didn't reply. She just cried and cried as if her heart was breaking, and then said, I hurt. When she heard that, Kunjan started to feel uneasy. She tried to think what she should do. Should she call the dorm owner, or what? Then the young woman said, please help me, sis." Kunjan told the young woman to look up because she wanted to know where she was hurt so she could help properly. But when the young woman looked up, Kunjan was shocked by the sight. The young woman's face didn't look like someone who had been beaten. Her face was swollen and covered in blood and pus, her face green, more like a bloated corpse. While she was shocked by what she saw, the young woman continued, "Please help me, sis. Please help me find Om." After that, tears streamed down Kunjan's face in shock. Kunjan quickly ran out of that room, got her car, and quickly drove back to her friend's dorm. When she arrived, her friends were all surprised why she had come back. Kunjan sat there for a while to compose herself, then told her friends everything she had encountered. Everyone agreed that this was quite serious. If she wasn't going back, she should at least call the owner to report what happened. After that, Kunjan decided to call the owner. She introduced herself, saying she was staying in this room, but the room next door, the young woman seemed unwell. She was just crying. She wanted the owner to go check on her. When she heard that, the owner sounded surprised and asked, "Which room?" Kunjan said, "The room right next door, Om's room." After she finished speaking, the dorm owner was silent and didn't say anything further. After a moment, she asked, "When did the young woman move back in? You didn't know the news, did you?" Kunjan was confused by that answer. She replied that she didn't know anything. What happened? The dorm owner didn't say anything further, but only asked where Kunjan was now. Kunjan said she was still at her friend's dorm and hadn't returned to her room. The owner then said to stay at her friend's dorm for now. She would handle things here. Then she hung up. When she heard that, Kunjan felt relieved that someone was going to check on the young woman, and things would probably end well. The next morning, before returning to her room, Kunjan decided to call the dorm owner again. When the owner answered, she tried to ask how the young woman was. The owner replied in a calm voice, "Please be brave, dear. That young woman, she passed away a month ago." The reason was that she and Om argued, and it seemed the man packed his bags and moved out. This young woman felt so sad that she decided to commit suicide in the bathroom. When she heard that, Kunjan's first reaction was disbelief. She tried to tell the owner that she had heard sounds, but the young woman was still living normally in her room. The owner said that Kunjan wasn't the only one who had experienced this. Other rooms in the area had heard the young woman's sounds too, to the point where they couldn't live there anymore and had all moved out. But it had gotten a bit better recently. The owner then asked Kunjan what she wanted to do, if she wanted to move out or stay. Since Kunjan didn't have many options at that time, moving out of the dorm seemed too difficult, so she decided to request a room change instead. She moved to a room on the opposite side, on the same side as her friends. The owner granted her request, but even after moving rooms, Kunjan and her friends still lived in fear, until finally they all moved out of this dorm 3 months later. This story goes back about 7 years ago. Kun King worked in the civil service and was ordered to transfer to Bangkok. This transfer completely changed his life. He had to change residences, change workplaces, and also face a new society. But there were still some good things. His workplace provided welfare housing, which helped Kun King save a lot on expenses. And importantly, the location of the housing unit was in the heart of Bangkok. When Kun King arrived, he found that this welfare housing was in the form of a flat. The building itself was an old structure that had been renovated. There were stairs on both sides, left and right. From what he could see, each floor had about 10 rooms. When he walked in, he could still clearly see traces of the old building in various parts. At that moment, Kun King started to feel uneasy, feeling strange about having to stay in this old building. And because he had a special sense, Kun King had goosebumps throughout his walk into the building. He just prayed in his heart that since he was going to live here, he hoped he wouldn't encounter anything strange. But if he couldn't avoid it and had to encounter something, he hoped it would be gentle and not too hostile. When he reached his room on the 3rd floor, he found that the room was quite spacious, with 1 living room and 1 bedroom. But the good thing also had a downside. None of the rooms had an en-suite bathroom. Everyone had to walk out to use the common bathroom on the floor. Kun King tried not to think much of it, thinking he just had to live there for now since he was here for work. He would see what happened later. After moving his belongings in, Kun King offered prayers and chanted that day, telling the local spirits that he would be staying there. After that, he went to bed as usual. But on the first night sleeping in a new place, you probably know what it's like, friends. You're not familiar with the place, so it's normal to have trouble sleeping, or to sleep lightly. Kun King just lay there, tossing and turning. Usually, he liked to sleep with his bedroom door open. That night, Kun King left his bedroom door open. After tossing and turning for a while, Kun King opened his eyes, trying to think what he could do to fall asleep. But at that moment, he suddenly saw something unusual in the darkness of the living room. Kun King saw the silhouette of a figure, a woman. The silhouette was in the living room, but what was terrifying and gave him chills was that the silhouette was not on the floor but clinging to the ceiling. At that moment, he wasn't sure what he was seeing. Kun King stared at the shadow until his eyes adjusted to the darkness. What he saw now was even clearer. It was a woman clinging to the ceiling, her posture like a spider. Her long hair hung down with gravity, making the sight even more terrifying. Kun King, who was starting to get too scared to bear it, decided to slowly sit up, but his eyes remained fixed on her, praying silently. "No, don't come down." It seemed she knew Kun King was staring at her. She slowly began to crawl on the ceiling, crawling directly towards Kun King. But just as she was about to reach the front door, she suddenly stopped and didn't move any further. Kun King then immediately realized that the area in front of the door, at the entrance, was where the Buddha shelf was installed. She might not have been able to enter. And when she realized she couldn't proceed, she turned her head in another direction and crawled straight to a corner of the room, stopping there still. Fear combined with the exhaustion of moving all day, Kun King felt he couldn't take it anymore. He really wanted to sleep. So he said in his heart, "I can't tonight. Can I sleep?" Not long after he finished speaking, she slowly faded away before Kun King's eyes. Kun King, still in a state of fear, quickly turned on the light and went to grab a prayer book. After that, he performed a full set of prayers, chanting until he was so tired that his body couldn't take it anymore, and he fell asleep without knowing when. The next morning, after waking up, Kun King thought about what he had encountered last night. He couldn't figure it out, so he just guessed that the woman he saw last night was probably a local spirit. He would make merits for her when he had free time. After that, Kun King continued to live in this flat as usual and didn't encounter this woman again. But the strange events weren't limited to just this one. Throughout his stay here, every time Kun King had to walk out of his room to go to the common bathroom, he would always see someone using the stairs on the left and right out of the corner of his eye. Every time Kun King saw someone, he would quickly walk towards the stairs, hoping to meet someone to greet and get to know. But every time he reached the stairs, he would be surprised because the stairs were empty. He didn't see anyone. At that moment, he just wondered. The stairs only had a few steps, but why did the person disappear so quickly? And the atmosphere in the building was unusually quiet. The floor Kun King lived on only had about 2 to 3 rooms. The rooms on the left and right, next to his, rarely had anyone in them. Then one day, Kun King remembered he went to the bathroom around midnight. After he opened his room door, he saw a man walking past his door. Kun King quickly greeted him, "Hello, brother." But it was very strange. The man walked past silently, not paying any attention to Kun King, not even looking at him. Because Kun King was from out of town and had only recently moved to Bangkok at that moment, he just thought, maybe people here don't like talking to strangers. Kun King tried not to think much of it and continued walking to the bathroom to do his business. The common bathroom was a row of many stalls, like typical public restrooms we see in malls. But the bathroom in this flat had an extra large door at the back that opened to a balcony, an area for drying clothes. At that moment, Kun King went into one of the bathroom stalls. While he was doing his business, he heard someone walk into the bathroom, and they walked into the stall next to his. Then he heard the sound of the toilet seat being lifted and the sound of someone sitting down. Kun King didn't pay attention. He continued his business until he finished. After that, he opened the door, but what he saw made him very confused. The bathroom stall next door was now open. No one was inside, and the toilet seat was still down and used. Kun King just stood there stunned. And the sound he heard, what was it? About 2 to 3 days later, after encountering many strange things, Kun King decided to call a friend, trying to invite him to stay at his room for a friend, because he had something to tell him. His friend came, and when he arrived, they had a small party. So Kun King didn't have a chance to tell his friend anything. After drinking and eating for a while, his friend got up to go to the bathroom. But after only a moment, his friend quickly came back in and asked Kun King, "Can people enter and exit rooms here?" That question confused Kun King. He didn't know what his friend was talking about. Kun King replied, "No. I locked the door when I came in." "Why?" His friend said that just now, when he walked out of the room to the living room, intending to go to the bathroom, he saw a man standing inside the room, blocking the exit door. When he heard that, Kun King was very surprised and insisted to his friend, "That can't be right. The door is locked. No one should be able to get in." His friend stood still and then said, "If I tell you something, will you be scared?" His friend then explained that as he walked out and saw the man, curious, he walked closer to ask, "Are you looking for King?" But just as his friend was about to reach the man turned his back and walked right through the door and out. His friend was very scared, so he quickly ran back in and told him everything. After finishing, his friend said, "Okay, I'm going back." He quickly gathered his belongings, clothes, grabbed his car keys, and before walking out, he turned to Kun King and said, "If we're going to eat out next time, let's eat outside. I'm not coming here again." And then he left the room immediately. Kun King continued to live in this flat for many years, and he had the opportunity to encounter strange things often. He said that after living there for a while, he got used to it. So he just lived there without thinking much. But if he had the chance, he would tell his story to others, or to his junior colleagues. Everyone would say the same thing. If they had a choice to meet for drinks or a party, they prefer to meet outside. Because if they met at Kun King's room, anyone might encounter strange things. Then came Songkran that year, a long holiday. So many people at the flat went home. It was almost empty, with only a few rooms occupied in the entire building. And on Kun King's floor, he was the only one. But Kun King didn't think anything of it. In fact, he liked it because the atmosphere was quiet and not chaotic. One night, he showered quite late, almost midnight. While Kun King was showering, the lights in the bathroom suddenly went out. But at that time, there was still some light filtering in from outside through various gaps, making Kun King very curious why the bathroom lights went out. Or perhaps the light bulbs were broken. But light bulbs shouldn't break all four at once. Kun King decided to open the bathroom door, and when he walked to the light switch, he found that the switch was on as usual. Kun King turned it off and on again, and the lights came back on. He thought it must have been a faulty light switch. Kun King then turned around to go back into the shower. At that moment, his eyes caught sight of something at the door leading to the back balcony. Kun King saw a man standing outside. He was tall and large, but what was abnormal was that the right side of his body seemed to have red liquid flowing down from his head, covering his entire body. At that moment, startled, Kun King thought someone might have had an accident. He quickly ran to check, but when he opened the door, the outside was empty. The man was gone. Kun King wasn't sure if he was imagining things, so he just walked back inside and continued showering. But during the shower, he still felt uneasy, wondering what he had just seen. 2 days later, while he was exercising downstairs, Kun King had the opportunity to meet the cleaning lady, the one who took care of the building. There were two cleaning ladies chatting. Kun King walked over to greet them and started chatting. Kun King then asked if anything strange had happened in their building recently. One of the cleaning ladies looked surprised and said, "Oh, where have you been? Don't you know? An accident happened a few days ago." The cleaning lady then explained that day she rode her bicycle to the front of the building around 5 a.m. When she arrived, she saw a man lying motionless on the ground. The cleaning lady saw him from afar and thought he might be drunk and sleeping there. She quickly pushed her bicycle closer, intending to wake him up. But when she got close, the cleaning lady was shocked. The man was lying in a pool of blood, gasping for breath. The old lady quickly dropped her bicycle and ran to get help. Many people came to help with first aid, but in the end, they couldn't save his life. He passed away right there. When he heard that, Kun King asked the cleaning lady what the man looked like. And when he heard the answer, he felt chills all over his body, because the description was just like the man he saw 2 days ago. The man who died when he fell, the right side of his body hit the ground, causing injuries all over his right side. He was tall and large. Kun King thought it must be the same man. After that, Kun King decided to go back up to his room, get dressed, and leave the flat to make merit for the man. That night, after returning from making merit, Kun King went to bed and he had a dream. In the dream, the man walked up to him and said, "Thank you. Thank you for making merit for me. I didn't mean to scare you. I just wanted to tell you that I didn't mean for that accident to happen, but it was because I was drinking before I came in, and I didn't know why that accident happened." Kun King lived in this flat for many years. From what he heard, Kun King might have encountered many scary horror stories, but Kun King said that after living there for a while, he got used to it. So he just lived there without thinking much. But if he had the chance, he would tell his stories to others, or to his junior colleagues. Everyone would say the same thing. If they had a choice to meet for drinks or a party, they prefer to meet outside. Because if they met at Kun King's room, anyone might encounter strange things.